Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman and joined alongside co-host John Dustin, president of JD Insurance. John, always a pleasure to see you.
Great to see you too, Jonathan. It should be a great segment.
Excellent. Do you want to introduce our next guest?
Sure. It's Dan, head of McWalter Volunteer Benefits Group. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, a pleasure to have you on. You want to tell us a little bit about McWalter Benefits Group, a volunteer benefits group, and what you guys do?
Sure. So we're an independent insurance agency. We're based in Concord with offices in the greater Boston area, but I'm on the benefits side. So I'm with McWalter Volunteer Benefits Group, and we focus on healthcare financing. So we focus on things from conventional insurance, but primarily we get into self-funding with companies from 50 employees all the way up to 500.
So Dan, the self-funding is becoming a little more prominent than it was. I mean, there was a stigma to it originally that people thought they had to be super large. But what are you seeing in the traditional marketplace that's driving people to that sort of a risk transfer mechanism?
Yeah, so it's been, it's been developing really over the last 20 years, but the Affordable Care Act really kind of perpetuated things. And so, over the last decade, costs are just, continuing to skyrocket. So within conventional insurance and healthcare costs are skyrocketing. And then within conventional insurance, you've got coverage that's diminishing. So you've got these two forces kind of working against each other. It's a top 5 expense that outpaces wage growth and inflation. And it's become unsustainable. And so thankfully there's been some innovation in companies now. I said 50 to 500 employees. We do work with companies smaller than 50 to self-fund as well. So it's become, people are starting to embrace it. They're starting to see that they have to kind of think more creatively about it and take control.
There needs to be an alternative. I like the way you say the Affordable Care Act. It's really the Unaffordable Care Act for most. And as you said, the divergence between the amount of benefits that you actually receive and the cost, they're going in the opposite directions.
So we don't provide benefits at our agency, Dan, but is it fair to assume that if we go a non-traditional route, the employee could actually get a better outcome and choice of provider and not be stuck with a medical gate and cost sharing?
Yeah, so, that's the thing. It's obviously an uphill battle. There's a long educational cycle to it, but, 90% of us have been deemed health illiterate. So 10% of us kind of understand coverage, understand a little bit how to navigate the system. So people have become so conditioned to think that conventional insurance is really the only way to protect against healthcare and a healthcare event. In reality, traditional health insurance really they're banks. They're banks. And so they're helping people, they're helping companies finance and deliver healthcare. And so ultimately their pinch point, if you will, is their network access. And so all we're doing is we're just changing the financing mechanism behind the scenes. We still provide the same network access. We still provide the same copays and deductibles, but we take out some margin and we start to implement strategies and solutions behind the scenes that actually enhance the consumer experience and start to educate people, start to empower them to be more informed consumers.
So Dan, let's back up for just a moment and give our listeners just a really high level overview of what self-insured means, because I think the perception is that, I got to have a bucket of money behind it somewhere that is going to fund insurance ultimately. Give our listeners just a broad overview of how it works.
Sure. So all we do is we take a conventional insurance premium and we break it down, we boil it down and we just build it back up. So when one is self-funding, all they're doing is paying the small claims that are incurred by their employees. And then we purchase a different type of an insurance product called stop loss insurance to protect against something catastrophic, like a pandemic, for example. And so, like I said, it's a long educational cycle, but we start by informing people, by telling them, by showing them that this is what a health insurance premium is comprised of. It's fixed. It's fixed, but it's comprised of your small claims from the previous 12 months, the cost to administer the plan, and then the insurance company is also purchasing reinsurance and protecting themselves, protecting their greater pool. So we just boil it down and we build it back up.
So where's that inflection point for typical company that you're dealing with? Is it when their premiums reach a certain level, it makes sense to start looking at it? And premiums seem to be wildly all over the place. I mean, from a consumer perspective and a small company, I look at it and say, I don't understand how IBM, I understand, economies of scale and supply and demand, but how, IBM is paying $400 a month for their employees and we're paying $3,000. There's no sense in the market of what makes sense for small businesses. It's no wonder they can't afford insurance.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, thankfully, one of the innovations that's come about really over the last 10, 15 years is what's called level funding. So really, the beauty of conventional insurance is that it's fixed. It's fixed for 12 months. But it's kind of like an adjustable rate mortgage where, after 12 months, that rate is going to change. And it's always going up. It's never going down. So, I mean, the inflection point really, it's frustration. So if somebody's been receiving these renewals and they feel like they've got this healthy population, but they've been getting these renewal increases of, say, trend, 6, 7, 8%, then they're probably frustrated. And it's at that point where we can really, we can kind of see eye to eye and they're kind of thinking along the same lines.
They're lucky if they're at 6, 7%.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Jonathan, you'd probably agree that even small companies, as a business consultant, you'd probably agree, small companies tend to spend a lot of time trying to find the best plan, and you can't satisfy everyone. But as an entrepreneur, Dan, what sort of cost savings, on average, do you think a company could really realize by stepping outside a traditional model?
It's minimal 5 to 10%. And so, at a minimum 5%, and then it's also thinking long-term and it's being strategic. So as we start to implement some of our cost containment strategies, that's where you can really bend the curve and you can build this plan that's going to creep along with maybe inflation or wage growth, but you're not going to be changing coverage. It's going to be stable. And people are going to start to, like I said previously, become more informed consumers. But also to Jonathan's point, the IBMs of the world, they've got this critical mass and this scale where they can, they know they've got the data, they know how their demographics are going to run. They can be very, they can predict their experience, and
they can negotiate with the carriers.
And they can negotiate. And so one of the great
Jonathan and I can't negotiate. We take what we get, and we don't get upset.
Every single Fortune 100 company is self-funding. They've got they just can. They can do it. They can do it safely, and it's the it's the best method for them. And so one of the great innovations that's come about again over the last 10 to 15 years is this concept of stop loss coalitions. And so these private preferred pools of like-minded employers that are self-funding, they're all rowing in the same direction. They've come together to build up this coalition that provides the purchasing power and the scale and the critical mass of a Fortune 100 company.
So Jonathan, I'm curious here, and I don't know if you are. If I don't have a traditional broker, what am I paying? Not exact fees, but who am I paying and how to implement a program like this?
Yep. So that's that's another way that we differentiate ourselves. Our fee is on a per employee per month basis. So we're completely fee based. Mm-hmm. So our compensation only increases with a company's employment growth. Our compensation does not increase with premium.
So it's an advisory fee, essentially.
Correct. Yes.
And what about from a admin perspective? I think a lot of perhaps HR benefit managers look at it and say, well, I don't want to have to become, a full-time administrator of benefits. I'm dealing with one of the big three in this area. I pay an invoice, and if I have an add or a deletion, it's pretty straightforward. What happens in a self-funded plan? Is there a lot more administration that's done?
No. No, there really isn't. We go out and we've got preferred partnerships in place with various third-party administrators. And so we go out and we contract with the TPA. And so that TPA is there to send out ID cards, to provide the customer service, to provide the back-end administration. So it's very seamless. It's really, our first goal, and when we're talking to somebody about going from conventional insurance to a self-funded model, is to not be disruptive. So we want to duplicate current plan design. We want to mirror the network, and we just want to flick that financing switch behind the scenes.
What percentage of companies out there do you think under, say under 1,000 are really self-funded? Just a rough, do they keep track of that?
Yeah, they do. So it's probably, it's been gradually increasing over the last definitely 5 years. And so now under 1,000, it's probably about 40 to 50% are self-funding. I think, don't hold that me to that, but the one that we definitely know about, which, is a discussion point when we're talking about the coalition and the purchasing power. Companies with 1,000+ employees, it's like 90% of them self-fund. It's because they can.
And because it makes sense, obviously,
Right.
they, as you said, they have the metrics, they have the numbers, they've crunched it all. It's fascinating. And I think what we haven't seen yet, and I've seen coming for a long time, is we're going to see this consumer uproar in this country. I know, for example, not to personalize it too much, it used to be that you got a free annual checkup. Now, you talk about something, an ailment that you have, and suddenly they've got an upcharge. There's no such thing as an annual visit anymore. You get charged for virtually everything. And so consumers are reaching into their pockets continuously in a traditional model. And I don't quite understand how people don't get, we haven't heard the uproar, as I've said. I think it's coming where people are saying, what are you talking about? I'm supposed to get this stuff annually, and yet it costs me $100, $200, $300, $500. Before you know it, you're $1,000 out of pocket. And you haven't gotten really anything different.
And you're right, because Jonathan, when you think about it, if you ask a question at your physical that could be prevented for the company, it's reducing their expense. Why are you paying an extra fee to ask the question? And they don't really get into depth sometimes. They give a quick answer and it's $25 or $100 or.
Yeah.
Well, and the challenge is there's zero transparency. I don't know about you, but I go to a multi-doctor practice. You can't ask a question relative to a bill. Nobody can answer a question. You have to wait till it goes through insurance. The answer is always the same. Well, you got to submit it to insurance and see what they pay. Where does that leave you as a consumer? On the hook.
It's such an opaque industry, fortunately and unfortunately. But so we all, Simon Sinek is obviously very influential these days, and we're all trying to figure out our why and exactly why we do what we do. And so mine was crystallized 3 years ago now, or 4 years ago now. I don't know. Time flies, I guess. But I was unfortunately diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, and so. I've got little kids. I've got 3 little girls. And so it happened in mid-October of, I guess it was 2019. Anyways, and so I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I had one of the well-known HMOs. I'm thrown into the system, and I've been doing this a while, but now I'm thrown into the system personally. I go in, I have a total colectomy. I have a terrible setback. So now I'm in the hospital for a month. I'm having every single scan just about known to man performed to figure out what's going on. I get through it, and then I go through chemo. And so I finally get through this whole experience that spring of 2020. And so, I'm in good health now, knock on wood. But anybody who's been through something like that or been through any sort of cancer treatment, you then go into this 5-year surveillance period. And so they took out my colon, my whole colon. So I had gone in for a colonoscopy. They found it. They take out my colon. And so now a year later, same insurance, same HMO, I go in to start my surveillance. And so now I go in for a flexible sigmoidoscopy. And the only reason it's different is because now I don't have a colon. So I go in for a flexible sig, and they try to stick me with the whole bill. There's no, they not only do they tout care coordination, it's on every billboard.
It's now a pre-existing condition, and you're not doing preventative screening anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I was furious, and we fixed it through coding. It ultimately boiled down to coding, at least in their opinion. But it's infuriating. And so, and I'm doing the right thing. I mean, I had been on the preventative path even before the diagnosis, thanks to having Lynch syndrome. And so now, I'm on this preventative path, and it's like, it's just this system. It's this opaque system where you've got these forces kind of working against the buyer, who's the employer, and the employee. And so ultimately, my why's been crystallized, and that's what we're doing. We're focusing on building consumer-friendly programs that are cost effective.
Well, important stuff, Dan, and certainly something, hopefully a wave and a trend to come. I think consumers are getting the short end of the stick, so to speak. And, we can't have a situation where, in many people's cases, their health insurance premiums are larger than their mortgages and taxes on their primary residences at this point per month. As you said, it's not sustainable in the long term. Glad to hear that you guys are doing something. Dan, if people want to get in touch with you, want to talk about what it is that you provide, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Sure. Yeah. Email is always best, which is dhead@McWalter benefitsgroup.com, or my office phone, which is 781-424-5582.
Great stuff, Dan. Thank you very much for the brief education in self-insurance and what you guys provide. Our guest has been Dan Head, Vice President of McWalter Volunteer Benefits Group, talking to us about some options as far as health insurance for yourselves and your company and your employees is concerned. And as always, John Dustin, a pleasure to have you on and co-host with you, and great to see everybody. And we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.